Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. If you are listening now, stay tuned. You will be very glad you did, because today's show is going to be absolutely stunning in its nature because of the guest that we have with us today, who is known as the Experimentalist. In fact, if you are seated at your computer, I would suggest that you go while I'm speaking and while we're conducting the interview to his website, www.experimentalist.com. Yes, you'll have to figure out how to spell it if you don't already know. But who we have with us is Gerard Senehi, who we'll be getting to in a moment. I just want to let you all know that we will be having a really interesting combination of total biology and neurolinguistic programming of seminar, October 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, coming up. And get in touch with us at the website, www.abetterworld.net, because it's beginning to fill up, and it's something that I think anyone interested in the subject of health and healing and understanding the emotional mindset behind physical illness will be very interested in. It's helping scores of people around the country and in Europe, and it's something you really want to plug into. I'm bringing in from L.A. Isabel Benares. We had her here a couple of years ago, and we're picking up where we left off with her. And students of total biology currently will get a lot out of this because it's providing practical tools to the use of total biology in people's lives. And just stay tuned, because next week we should be following up with Dennis Kucinich about the beginning of the impeachment process that he has engaged Congress in, as well as following up on the Democratic Convention and what he thinks about what's going on. So it's something that I think you'll all enjoy as well. So now, when we look at, as we often do on our show, the far-reaching possibilities of mind consciousness and their implications for reality, we have invited to join us today Gerard Senehi, who is very much in many ways a casual specialist, I could say, in these things. He's internationally recognized as a superstar in psychic entertainment. I must say it really expands the idea of entertainment to know him. A master of telekinesis, thought reading, and telepathy, Gerard often has members of the audience, to their total astonishment, mysteriously and successfully perform impossible, or heretofore thought of as impossible, feats. With a joyful and impromptu style, Gerard's performances sweep people out of ordinary reality. Could this possibly be for real, is the question often asked after the dust settles and people regain their feet on the ground under their feet. After all, they witnessed with their own eyes what they otherwise thought of as the miraculous. His lighthearted approach to these serious demonstrations catches even the most resolute cynics off guard. So today's show is going to be looking at these vital questions of what is reality, and because Gerard has a way of bending it and showing us its plasticity, it's something that we can all gain from when it comes to matters of our health, our well-being, but also even our spiritual evolution and development, because I think Gerard would be saying to us very soon, and we'll be hearing it from his own mouth, if this is possible for him, it is possible for all. So welcome, Gerard.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great to be here.
So glad you're here.
Yeah.
So did you fly here? Did you move through doors and windows to get here, or did you take a car?
I teleported instantaneously.
When I saw you moving through the wall, that's what I thought.
That freaked you out, right?
It did. I expected it, but to see it is really something else.
Great.
How in your life, at what point did you realize that you had a certain kind of gift that, let's say, other people don't have yet developed?
Well, I was curious when I was probably about 10 or 12, and I had a couple of little small psychic experiences. So it made me really curious at a young age. And
like what kind of experiences did you have?
Just things like somebody would say something and I would it would come to my mind before they said it. Or
well, that's happened to me too. I mean,
exactly. So that
back
just
then,
made me
now,
little things. Exactly.
It
that
gave
just
you a
made
little
me curious.
inkling
Yeah.
of potential.
Yeah.
And then what happened? What gave you the real sense that you were able to bend glass, with a martini in it without spilling, things of that sort?
Well, I started to experiment, and that's why I call myself the experimentalist. And that was more about 10 or 12 years ago, when I was looking for a career that would give me the freedom to pursue my spiritual interests. And I committed myself to it and started experimenting. And I make the analogy that it's like music, that it's a creative art. So you just, in the same way that if you create a new genre of music, then you improvise, it's the same thing with this art. It's just, it's a creative art.
Yeah, sure. I understand. What were you doing before this? Bending spoons?
Before this, I was a graphic designer.
Really?
So I was an artist. See?
Wow. Yeah.
Creativity is a pleasure.
Interesting prelude. Yeah. But you do have a background. You went to Amherst. You studied psychology. You have a graduate degree in psychology as well?
In psychological education, yeah.
Interestingly, because I have a background in psychology, of course, too, it could be said that most psychological studies could actually limit the frame of what's possible, which you certainly broke out of. So that might not have been very good training ground for you, but your own inner promptings, your own inspiration to break out and see what's possible was probably more your guiding light.
Yeah, psychology interested me because if you're interested in knowing yourself, psychology seems like one of the first steps. It's basic, it's rational, and but you come up across its inherent limits because the psychological doesn't address a lot of real human questions. Like, who am I? Why am I here? It doesn't really...
Existential, ontological questions we're all faced with.
Yeah, and also it doesn't really give you insight into what is the mind, what are emotions. It tells you about how they work. But, and it tells you some of the chemistry of it if you study neuropsychology or whatever. But it doesn't actually, give you a perspective on what it is, how do we relate to thoughts, and how do we relate to feelings. What about motivation? It doesn't touch the issue of motivation at all. Even if you go to a therapist and they help you deal with your feelings and emotions, they generally don't touch the issue of motivation.
Exactly. You have to go into some of the ancient texts of Tibet and elsewhere to begin to get a glimpse of the role of motivation in one's psychological life on a deeper, you could say, soul level.
Right. And so then the big question is, why are we here? And that's the question that psychology didn't answer. And my work as a performer doesn't really answer that question either. It just plays with it. Right. Because it messes with people's sense of reality. But I don't see my work as anything more than a kind of fun art form that I sometimes use to shake up people's belief system in order to explore reality, because part of the difficulties we have in terms of exploring reality is we already have so many fixed ideas about it. So if I can create a little crack in reality by doing what I do, which is very hard to, kind of rationalize, then it creates space. And we always need space. I mean, myself included. Because the more you think the more you need space for what you don't know. So we always need to create space for that, That's why, for instance, we can one day be completely awestruck by looking up at the sky, but then a few days later we look up again and it's already kind of absorbed into our reality, and this vastness and mystery is not really, we've closed the space for that.
Right. It's no longer awesome. They did experiments with Zen monks and the gonging of a gong.
Yeah.
And the advanced monk heard the gong as though it were novel and fresh each time, whereas the younger monks heard it and internally they were able to track through watching EEG Oh, I heard that before, i.e., they began habituating the experience
Fascinating.
and therefore
Yeah.
not being present each moment as a fresh crystalline experience.
That's a great that's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So give us some idea, Gerard, of the kind of the scope of what you do. And when you do all these performances, you could say, for corporations and parties, it's so funny because the way I know you through One Voice Coalition, it's such a deep inquiry into the nature of reality and having a purposeful life. And I know you're part of Enlighten Next, the wonderful spiritual organization. And so you yourself have done such inquiry, obviously, as well. And so we know each other in that context. And to think of you being a performer at parties is just kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
It's so much, in a sense, not you.
That's
except,
right, yeah.
of course, the way you're teasing, I think, is fabulous.
Yeah.
And as we say, exploring and expanding people's sense of what's possible.
Yeah, right. I used to look at what I do as kind of separate. It was like kind of my way of making a living. But then things kind of became integrated because who you are is who you are.
There you go.
And it's very weird how we compartmentalize who we are, and we have our spiritual lives and then our ordinary life and our work life and family life. I mean, that's all really weird. And I used to do that.
Truly, yeah.
I really used to do that. But there is so I've found that through my work that it does kind of express a little bit this sense of mystery, which I'm very captivated by myself. So it's an authentic, interest in that. And then the question always for me is, how can I take it further? So it's always, I never feel like there's always room for more creativity, more ways of expressing it. And if I'm most of the time I'm hired to perform as an entertainer, so I don't impose my own ideas or philosophy, but at the same time I feel there's a way to just be yourself that communicates your ideas and philosophy without passing them on as ideas to somebody else. It communicates who you are instead of the ideas about who you are.
Exactly.
So,
it's sort of like the real thing. It's idea made flesh, if you will.
Yeah, and that's a very developmental process. I'm, learning more and more how to do that. And because of it, I've made, I've initiated fascinating conversations with major leaders, philanthropists, and
you were engaged by a few top government leaders and countries, world leaders across the world, asking you to help them with your power to gain political and military advantage. What an interesting...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't participate in that. I said no.
Right. I would
but
have
it does, that
thought.
Yeah, and in the early days, people used to ask me all sorts of, if I could help them with this, that, finding lost people, monies. Now less so, because I think instead of just people being fascinated by what I do, they get a little more of a sense of who I am and what my values are. So
yes.
I don't get approached with those kinds of questions that much anymore.
Yeah. If it were you were being asked by these leaders, how can you give me a political advantage to help in the cause of peace, would have been really interesting. And you might have thought twice about helping them, you know,
right.
instead of military advantage, but the advantage of creating peace in their region of the world.
Okay, so you bring up a very interesting question here, which is what is the relationship between what I do and addressing, consciousness and addressing change and the human potential, the next human potential. Because
Exactly.
I think one of the things I'm really passionate about is that there's a lot of confusion about what will spiritual results look like. You've got the Buddhist, some of the Buddhist teachings that tell you that spiritual results mean you can walk through walls. By the way, I don't walk through walls. Just in case
really
anybody
drove.
took it seriously, yeah, I drove through walls. So there's the idea you walk through walls and you don't feel any pain. That's the results. There's other ideas that you're able to move matter with your mind. That is a spiritual result, that you can read mind, as I seem to be able to do, and so on. Which which I tell people it's crazy. It's totally, that is not what the world needs, more mind readers or more people who can move things with their minds. But it does open up the question of what are real results? What do they really look like? What would it mean to, people use the word evolved consciousness or conscious evolution. What would that actually mean? And I think that's something I'm really excited about, because the more we can clarify that, the more we take the mystery out of the myths out of spiritual life, which prevent being in touch with the real mystery. There's a lot of myth in spiritual life that keeps it that actually keeps the real thing at a distance.
Exactly, the real mystery at a distance.
The real mystery, and also the real results, because I think spiritually we've always had results. Like consciousness evolving has yielded, for instance, human rights. That's an incredible spiritual expression of the evolution of our culture.
Women's voting,
exactly.
But I want to make a kind of a classic distinction here. Since you brought this up in a broader way, which, yes, you're totally right, I was aiming at, which means you must have been reading my mind. But it's okay, because I was also reading yours.
Good, we're even.
And that is this idea in the spirituality from the East of there being something called the siddhis, i.e. the powers that accrue as a result of being in one's, say, Buddha nature, being in one's true self, and the clearing that takes place of the subconscious contents of mind that slow us down, that self-sabotage, that keep us from our true cognition of self as divine. These things do come about where our ability to see more translucently, if you will, just becomes part of one's new reality. And it's easy. It's like not an effort. But one also says the classic teaching is that we not get caught by those things, that we not get absorbed or prepossessed by our new powers, that we stay the course of going toward the light and being in service, seva, dharma, to humanity, to sentient life. So you are, and I really like this, by the way, if I'm reading this correctly, that is, you see these siddhis, if you will, as ways of showing people, of demonstrating to them the possibility of human life, of the human brain, of the human mind, the nervous system, what its real potentiality is, so they can make it for themselves in a spiritual, conscious way.
Not quite. I mean, I'm not showing them the potential, because I don't think that is the potential. But
what do you think?
What do I think is the potential? Okay, because I think that's the most important question. So just to clarify, get the other question out of the way.
Yeah.
I think I just use it to, because last December I spoke to several hundred scientists in India who are at the top yoga research institute. And they are convinced that the fruition of our spiritual development is these siddhis or abilities. Oh. And then they relate to me as like, well, I'm spiritually evolved because I'm not claiming they're important. But actually, they are not important. They're, totally, it's just an art form. It's nothing more than that, And I was telling them, for instance, that you can be psychic, but you can be a horrible person. So that shows that there's no necessarily any connection.
But that's what it means. That's why classically the siddhis are not considered important, because if a person isn't developed emotionally and in integrity, then who cares if you can stand on your head, spin around at 50 miles an hour and serve a cup of tea at the same time. Right. Doesn't matter.
So let's go into your question then. What is the potential? Right? Because I think that's also my own understanding is evolving, where now I'm not just interested in saying it's not about the psychic abilities, but I'm interested in elucidating what are spiritual results look like, and what are they, because that's what's really interesting, and I think that's what's going to help us aim for the right direction, because depending on what we consciously or unconsciously imagine as the results, we're going to go in one direction or other. So the results that I see, the most important results, I'll just launch into it because I've not really had this conversation.
Sure.
But in this context. But I think the results that I see is one is you want to be able to obviously free yourself from fear and desire. Okay, that's a classic, spiritual, kind of, that's been a spiritual goal classically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in order to what? Because what does that make possible? And I think this is where it gets really interesting, because freeing yourself from fear and desire means that, if I could just add one other thing to that, freeing yourself from fear and desire, and then the other thing is having a genuine, authentic connection with the big picture, with the big picture of who we are, why we're here. Because if you have a small, you can free yourself from fear and desires, but have a small picture of who you are, and then what you'll do is you might work at a hospital and serve others, which is tremendously profound and valuable, not to take anything away from that. But the world needs also other kinds of engagement, which I think is what I'm really interested in. So if you free yourself from fear and desire, and from ego, that is, and you embrace a big picture, what it makes possible is people, you always hear like we are one and consciousness is one. It makes it possible to start to discover with other people what that means. This is what we're doing at Enlighten Next, for instance, is we've been in this process of purification and expanding our sense of self, but for the purpose of really engaging with each other in a way that we can witness the non-limited nature of consciousness between us with other people. Because what happens then is, not only does one's consciousness evolve because you're going beyond fear and desire and you're embracing something bigger, but also consciousness allows, with people, it allows new culture to be formed. Because the most important element is, how do we relate to each other? That's what, it's not just the inner experience of consciousness, but in the outer expression of it. Because often spiritual life is focused on the inner connection with consciousness.
You have just articulated perhaps one of the central themes, not perhaps, of my very existence, which is going from the cushion, as you could say, to the boardroom.
Yeah, right.
To go from the mountain into the urban streets.
Right.
To take the inner experience of oneness and bring it into the outer community, where that kind of upgrade evolution is most needed. And not only needed, but that's where you want to play.
Right.
That's why we're here.
Right.
Human beings are social beings.
Right.
And not only that, it's also the testing ground. It's rather easy to be rather enlightened when you're in a monastery or monastic setting. I know, I've done
exactly, right.
And
or in meditation, right.
Exactly, in meditation, in the inner life. And when you go from that meditation cushion into a conversation, be it on the phone or on the radio, you are, in a sense, being tested. Are the stress levels going up?
Right.
Is the subconscious debris coming in?
That's right.
Or can you remain one-centered, free, and loving?
Right. And can also consciousness find freedom within you to express itself and interact with others in the recognition of itself? Because we want to be free. We want to be free. We want to bring that which we experience in deep spiritual experience into action and into action. And then, because what's really interesting is something really mysterious comes alive when 2 or 3 or 4 people do that together.
Totally.
Because if you do that just yourself, it's great. I mean, it's extraordinary. If any individual who can actually do that.
You can say it's like sex with yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that's
distinct from.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
How's that for a metaphor?
I'll have to
contemplate
on that one. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Just stop my mind on that one.
There we go. Nothing's better than when you have several others. No, wait a minute. But when you're engaged, let's say, with other. in an experience of self, because then the selves actually find points of confluence where the idea of self-identity actually begins to dissolve. I mentioned sex in that way kind of playfully, but in reality, and we've had a number of tantric teachers on, and my own background also is in this domain as well to some extent, and it is in fact in that deep opening of the heart chakra and the others that allow us to actually dissolve our boundaries between self and other. And that is, as you're suggesting, Gerard, where the magic and the mystery begin to show themselves.
That's right. And because I think that mystery comes through, like, for instance, in musicians, as you were saying, in tantric sexuality, which I don't know much about, but I know that that's also part of the goal there. It can come through in sports also, that kind of sense of dissolving boundaries. In fact, that's how it started for me, was in sports. I experienced this boundarylessness spontaneously, and that's what really inspired me on the spiritual path as opposed to the interest in psychic stuff. But the extraordinary
I totally get that, by the way, because I am, among other things,
You're
a jock.
Musician, right?
And that too. I mean, I started playing music when I was 11, saxophone and then later piano. So I know what it is to merge musically, like you're saying.
Right.
And I also know what it's like, and also through singing, but also through sports. I mean, literally as recently as yesterday morning, playing a form of tennis, paddle tennis, where I see that I totally lose my mind, and I'm totally hyper conscious of the moment.
Exactly, right.
Thought free, in the present, in motion, in movement.
Yeah.
Powerful.
So those are really cool. And then when it happens not in a specific context like music or sport or anything else, when it happens through your own engagement with consciousness itself, free from specifics. No object, and then with other people, because then I think the what brings it into kind of a more sense of the profundity and sacredness of life is this sense that conscious human beings can actually engage with the creative force of the universe consciously, not just as an experience. Because I think when it happened to me in sports, it was as an experience, but to actually be doing it consciously with others, it's like the universe, it's the sense that the universe is conscious through individuals. It's not just coming through individuals like it would in sports or in music. Because I think in sports and music, whatever the universe or the cosmic creativity or whatever comes through people. But in this conscious evolution, which I think is really what the cutting edge is, and that's what we're trying to bring forth at Enlight Next, then, the universe is actually conscious through the people. It's actually consciously engaging with itself. I mean, it's hard to describe because
it is. Yeah. It sounds very abstract.
Interesting.
No, honestly.
No, good.
And it's funny. I just was in Santa Barbara and I interviewed Barbara Marx Hubbard, the founder of the Foundation for Conscious Evolution.
Yeah, she's terrific.
Who is like helping to morph the human species so it can receive the cosmic rays, if you will, of potential development as a species. On that species, talk about working in the hospital on the micro level and being of service. That's fabulous. Then there are those of us who are more systems thinkers, who are looking at the entire globe or even the solar system as a system through which we want to be consciously interacting.
Right.
So it's very cool. No, I hear some of what you're saying in between the cracks, you could say, of the importance of relating to what might be a consciously intelligent universe. And we, when we clear ourselves of the inner debris, become utterly interconnected with that. The fact is we are already interconnected. It's just we've lost sight of the interconnectedness.
Right,
Now,
right.
then you, in fact, let's let everybody know, we're speaking today with Gerard Senehi, who is known as the Experimentalist, who, if you're having a party or you own a Fortune 100 corporation and you would like him to be performing, please just call or visit his website. But he's performing here today at Progressive Radio Network on A Better World. No, you're a delightful man, and I so appreciate what you're up to and where you're going. And what you're opening up. I mean, you are opening up some very powerful realms for people, Gerard, through what you can do. And you are showing people what is possible. No matter what we say, you are bending reality and showing us that there is another way of seeing what's possible. And that changes everything.
Right.
And it means that we've all got the hardware. I mean, it's not like you came with an absolutely extra set of neurons. We probably could count and see that we have the same, but somehow you've broken successively out of a series of boxes of programs that society laid out for one and all, and you said, wait a minute, and you got whisperings, and there's a whole karmic constitution, if you will, and you walked through that doorway, and it's beautiful. It really is.
Thanks.
I so appreciate
Thanks.
it. You know what I'd like to do is give people a little taste of what we were doing before the show.
Sure, yeah.
Of some of your far-ranging skills, since people can't see you
Right.
bending glass and such things or walking through doors. Well, not doors, but walls. Doors, yes. Would you like to do what you were beginning to demonstrate earlier?
Okay, so you have 2 words in your mind, right? Do you have 2 words? Do you have these 2 words in your mind?
I can put them there, yeah. At least.
The first one was the.
Oh, from what we were doing with the book.
Yeah, you looked up a few words in the book.
That's right.
Do you remember them? If you don't
Yes, I
remember,
do.
we can do
I
something
remember.
else.
I remember.
Yeah. All right.
I even remember what page they're on.
Oh, you do.
In short,
Yeah.
so everyone is on the same page, no pun intended here.
Let's do it again.
Let's do
we'll
it.
do both. I'll get the previous one. We'll do it again. You have your own book in front of you.
I have a book before me.
All right. Open it to any page.
I am opening it to any page.
And memorize the first few words.
Only I can see the first few. Oh, yes.
But make sure the first 2 or 3, right?
Yes.
Okay, you got to close the book. Okay, I'm gonna get the words that you had before. Okay.
Yes.
So the previous words had something to. It's a country,
Yes.
and it's our famous country, right?
Yes.
The United States. Okay, that's cool.
That is correct.
All right, now we're gonna try the other words. Please put your finger down on the page here without looking. Just at any.
This is going to be difficult.
Oh, you think so? Put all right. Put it on. Okay, you put it on the word no. Was that your first word?
No.
It wasn't. That's really weird.
Well, you see, this is where I said it would be difficult because it was actually a number.
Oh, a number.
It was
Okay.
a number. It
Skip
was
the number.
Like a recipe.
All right, that's okay. But all right, do you remember the first ingredient on the recipe?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to look it up, or do you know?
I know it.
Some sort of fish? Yes or no? Fish?
Close.
Shrimp?
Oh, I thought it was sea salt, but I think it was. What page?
I
was
picked
that
it up from your unconscious. I don't know. It's you. You had the page.
Did you see what page it is? That was. No, it wasn't that one either.
Let me
Okay.
psychically
You know
pick it
what?
up. Wait,
Let's
hold on.
do it again.
No. You
So
know.
you have 2 ways of doing it then.
Is that it?
Yes.
What is its first line?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I picked it up from your unconscious.
Oh, that was good.
Oh.
1 1/4 pound large shrimp. And underneath it is sea salt.
Interesting.
Oh my God. I remembered the sea salt and forgot the shrimp. But when you said shrimp, I went, wait a minute. That too sounds familiar. Wow.
Here, take
Gerard.
off your glasses. We'll try something else, okay?
Okay.
Put them in your hands like this. Both hands. We're just going to try and...
These glasses started moving. Gerard waved his hand over my hands holding my glasses, and the glasses began to wobble as a result.
You have to be there.
is
But
that
anyway,
a
you're not
trip?
there, so you're hearing
Yeah.
Mitchell's interpretation of it. All right, let's take this. Your pen. This is your pen?
Yes.
Okay, hold that out. Hold it in your hand. One hand, maybe. You put your glasses away.
Oh, okay.
We'll just try and see if we can telekinetically make it flip over.
Oh, my God.
Perfect. That was beautiful.
That was excellent. Oh, my God. If you could all see this. We're going to have Gerard on the TV show so you can literally see what is going on. There was a pen sitting in my hand, and he waved his hand above it, and the pen flipped over. I am flipping over. That's what's going on. So, having these skills,
Yeah.
and it's one thing to demonstrate with a pen and glasses and
Yeah.
reading the mind, and I mean, I can do mind reading to some extent as well.
Yeah.
Not of that order quite, but what is it like to have these skills on a day-to-day basis as you walk through your life? How does it show up?
It doesn't really actually show up in any way whatsoever, except when I'm performing. That's the only time I use them. And on occasion, like here we are on a radio show, I did a few
Yes.
things for you. So on occasion, I will...
But is that because you're compartmentalizing your mind? Because say you're driving.
No, I'm a music... It's like, remember, it's the art analogy.
Yes.
Do you play music all the time?
Well-
no, you play music when you play music. You might be at a party, and you might not be on stage.
But
and
you
say-
might be driving in your car singing.
That's right.
So if you're
That's right.
driving, so let's say that you have a certain psycho-neuro-emotional headset.
Yeah.
And so you're driving down the highway, and you sense that someone might be intoxicated within your general radius. Will you be able to pick that up and, in a sense, avoid harm's way?
I'm good at picking up when the police car is going to be ahead. I'm not kidding. Somehow I kind of get like when I'm accidentally speeding,
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention. All of a sudden I get a sense I got to slow down. There's a police car ahead.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. But because
That's if I'm relaxed.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it works. I mean, I have theories about how this stuff works. Okay,
Yeah.
we're
Go
going
ahead.
into another area which I'm not, totally. It's not
It's
my passion,
imaginary.
but I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
It's curious.
Well, say a word or two
Curiosity,
about what
but
you think.
I
Then I
think-
have something more meaty I want to get into right afterwards.
Yeah, great. I think that these things happen when you're in a state of receptivity, that you're not attached to the results, and you're having fun, and you're not invested in the outcome.
Mm-hmm. So you're...
That's my theory.
Yep. Got it. So interesting. So interesting. Do you feel that your spiritual life has, the work that you do at Enlighten Next, influence your capacity in your psychic entertainment life?
Absolutely, yeah, tremendously, yeah.
Tremendous, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, not so much in terms of giving me more kind of abilities, but in the sense of...
But in terms of quieting and not being attached to the results, all the things that you just enumerated.
Yeah, because a great entertainer should be able to forget himself.
There you go.
Or herself.
Right.
And so my work at Enlighten Next has helped that tremendously because, when I first started performing, I was actually quite self-centered. Not that I'm not anymore, but
Don't we all have it?
I mean, that's the human condition, that, and
Totally.
it runs so deep, so as a performer, rather than being completely available for the audience, you're kind of like, aren't I great? Let me show off.
It's egoic.
It's egoic, yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. So,
and one understands.
Yeah.
And this is our human work, is it not?
That's
to
right.
Get out of the way so magic can happen.
Right.
Oh my. There we go. Now, let's look at a larger picture. Okay, Gerard.
yeah.
With these skills, you were approached for the wrong reasons by some world leaders.
Right.
But can you see that these skills in you, or even better in a collective, but let's just say you, if you were to focus your mind on a certain outcome of, let's say, peace in a region,
Yeah.
or in soldiers that were otherwise blowing each other's heads off minutes before, you had them slapping each other's on the back and singing songs together because your force of visualization is so great. Could you use these skills, this art form, to bring about these kinds of sociological changes?
I've experimented with doing certain things like healing and trying to figure out where bin Laden is and different things. But it's never worked. I mean, with healing, I had one, kind of experience that caught me off guard when it was the one time that I wasn't actually trying. And I was just doing it playfully, and then...
That's so funny.
This was an elderly woman's knee who had really bad arthritis. And then the pain completely went away. But...
do you know what you did to bring that about internally?
I didn't do anything, no.
You didn't do anything?
No. I mean, I think...
Did you see her as arthritis-free? Did you see her in her healthiest, happiest, optimal state?
I think healers...
Did you laugh?
No, I didn't really because I wasn't even trying, really. I was just being kind of playful. But I felt a certain energy transfer from my hand to her knee. So I'm guessing that healers have the capacity maybe to allow something. But it's not connected to what I do, my performance. It's not at all connected. It's something completely different.
Okay. But it's sort of like you've got the hardware and the software developed, if you don't mind the computer analogy,
Not at all.
to affect certain outcomes, from the spinning of a pen in my hand to reaching into my subconscious and grabbing a few words, grabbing a few shrimp, as it were, And so, well, why not look at taking this skill and harnessing it in a direction, of course, and I know you're so familiar with this because this is part of you, in a direction that would make an extraordinary difference in the world and the way we conduct our lives as human beings on this planet, i.e., you are part of a group called Enlighten Next. Well, that suggests something a lot about what my life is about, which is essentially establishing the kingdom of Shambhala on Earth, i.e., an enlightened society.
Right.
And I feel that we're actually only inches away, and it's darkest before the light. That's where I believe we are in human and planetary evolution.
Right. But so then, because I'm totally with you on that, and I think the real interesting potential is in what we were speaking about, evolving consciousness, not in influencing people's actions in that kind of external way. I think we have to change the way that we relate to our own self, what we identify with, because part of the problem is, going back to what we were saying earlier, is that we identify with ego rather than identifying with the universe. When we have the experience of the universe or of God or whatever you have, we project it outside ourselves, and we say, that was an experience, that's not who I am, that's something outside myself. And even very, very spiritual people do that. They always project it outside themselves and say, no, I am separate from that. And so, and you can't just kind of go also, then you have other people who say, yeah, I am one with the universe, nothing matters and all that. But we have to find a real, a way to actually make that real, not just kind of say it and then abide in some sort of state of detachment. That's not what it is either. We actually also have to discover what that means to be one. We don't actually really. So I think becoming conscious evolution is about exploring that. It's about bringing that to life, and you can't do it without other people, because you only see, how can you see something that's not separate from by yourself? You can't really do that. You can experience it, but you can't really explore it, bring it to life, and bring it.
Exactly. You just reminded me, my friend Bruce Lipton, wonderful cellular biologist who I
Yeah.
had on the show a number of times on TV and radio. He was telling me, I saw him very recently out on the West Coast, and he told me that there was this amazing guy at Deepak Chopra's house or place down in San Diego area who was performing incredible feats. And as he was saying, I read his mind. And I said, that was Gerard. And he said, yeah, I think so. I said, was he tall, good-looking, dark hair? I was kidding about the good-looking. No. And he said, yeah, that was him. He was doing things. He was blowing people away. I said, that's Gerard. Definitely. Of course. Then I got the whole connection. And he said, he just had the best things to say. Now, this suggests that you were brought into a context, Gerard, where people, leaders in the field of transformation, as Deepak sees it, were gathered in order to uplift their imagination, their creativity, their commitment to making a difference in the world through theme of today's show, conscious evolution. And you were brought in to, in a sense, facilitate the truth of what's possible.
Not really. No, no. We had a day event where these leaders were gathered in order to explore what collectively they can do rather than working in isolation. And I was there because I'm on the board of the Source of Synergy Foundation, which was one of the co-conveners. So I helped in the design of the day. And then we wanted to do something in the evening to just give them a good time. And so my show was, kind of to give them a good time. I don't mean to deflate the balloon, my own balloon, but that's actually the truth.
Oh, that's so funny. Some say entertainment, but I say entrainment.
That's cool.
You see?
Yeah.
First of all, I don't believe you. But
true.
You said what is appropriate for you to say.
No, it's true. It really is true.
Okay. But
and also
entertain this group.
Yeah.
Like this,
That's
instead
right.
of having, a rock and roll or jazz band
right.
or Pete Seeger, was to show and demonstrate, these far-flung dendritic possibilities,
But it was fun. It was really fun. Actually, one of the...
I have to interpret it for you. Don't you see that, Gerard?
Yeah,
you
right.
can't speak it yourself.
No. I think... Anyway, one of the leaders there, the evolutionary leaders, afterwards told Deepak, I think Gerard works for the CIA.
Oh, my word. Oh, well, you didn't have the totally desired outcome.
That's the opposite extreme.
Yeah, right. Of course, the CIA, if you really think about it, they've been into some really cool things for a long time, following the leaders on the planet, so...
And then there was one famous scientist who was there who actually wanted to test me and wanted to write to everybody that this is the most important, was interpreting it in the way that you are. And I spoke with him and I clarified it. I'm really not being falsely humble here, believe me.
Was it Dean Radin, by any chance?
No, it wasn't Dean Radin,
okay.
no.
Yeah. It's interesting. No, I'm not trying. I wouldn't say it's the most important.
No, but even...
wouldn't say that.
I'm not belittling it. I'm not really, because I think it's a very cool entertainment. I mean, it's very unique. It's cool. It's, and it has the potential to, at best, to, kind of, make people question their, it can create a sense of, kind of awe in the same way that good music or, really, really, but it's not more than that. It really isn't.
Okay. So I have to take your word for that?
No.
Okay.
Right.
And I'll say why. Because what this is demonstrating is the role of mind over matter. And this is actually a deeply theological as well as spiritual question, which is what really is the role of mind in matter. A friend of mine who's a Jungian analyst has been sponsoring for about 19 or 20 years a group in Assisi called the Therapeutic Context of Spirit and Matter. as a Jungian analyst and is looking at that interface, that confluence. And I think it's really important because most people feel like they are victim to the material world. They are subject to bacteria, to fungus, to viruses, to conditions.
Right.
But what you are demonstrating and what many of us are teaching is that no, it's not quite like that at all. Yes, there is a confluence and an interface where you do want to go according to the Taoist notion of balance and moderation and harmony, God knows, with nature and the elements. But there is also another really keen idea that we know from always, that mind determines the nature of matter. And that's what you, by flipping a pen in my hand, are demonstrating. So the implications of that are powerful. If you decide to do it purely as a matter of entertainment, that's great. But when I say entrainment, you are showing people what they themselves could possibly do if they cultivate their mind along certain pathways. That is a form of conscious evolution.
No, definitely not. It's not conscious evolution.
This is so much fun.
I don't know that we have time to kind of elucidate.
We have a few more
that,
minutes, so can you do it in 30 seconds?
Well, I can just say that conscious evolution has to do more with engaging with who we really are.
Okay. You want to make the distinction on that level.
It's very important.
I appreciate
it's really important, yeah. Whereas this is the psychic stuff, if it's real, and I say if it's real, the psychic stuff, if it's real, it's just a human capacity. It's all that it is, in the same way that thinking capacity is a human capacity.
I totally
Emotions
agree with you.
is a human capacity.
Yes.
So the psychic stuff is a human capacity. It has nothing to do with conscious evolution.
Only in as far as once you understand the nature of the hardware and the software better, you can begin to consciously involve with greater integrity, potentially, and at least effect.
Yeah, but you don't need any psychic abilities
for integrity
to consciously evolve to an extraordinary, to a degree that
Agreed.
is beyond anything that I've seen even.
I totally get it. You can have Ralph Cramden as a bus driver treating everybody as though they were God and always doing what he says he's going to do, being totally faithful to his highest ideals and always in love with every moment and not have a bit of the skill that you have.
Sure, beautiful, yeah, beautiful.
So I really do agree with that.
Great.
I am me. So
great.
Therefore, what you're bringing forth is what I do try to show people so much, but not as well as you can in terms of demonstration, that the so-called impossible is possible.
Right.
It's just operating according to a different perception and level of law, if you will.
Right,
as Gurdjieff would say.
Right. Yeah, great. And I think the impossible that I want to bring attention to, like when I did with these scientists in India, is that of our ability to become conscious of the universe as ourselves. That's a new, impossible possibility.
Totally. That's a really interesting thing where there's it's totally one with the Tao. You know?
Then you skip all the basic steps of proving that consciousness exists, because these scientists are all trying to prove that consciousness exists. Well, I'm like, if you step right into embracing the universe as ourselves, then then you see proving that as just a minor little, that's not what's really important. If we can experience who we really are, then we don't need proof. In fact, they may never be that physical proof that we're looking for, because the universe is unlimited. We'll never be able to kind of materialize it in the way that even people who want to prove psychic phenomena are trying to do. We don't need to materialize that, because even if we do that, it's not going to be enough proof for the skeptics anyway. What we all need is the real experience of boundarylessness. That's what we need. We don't need proof that it exists, because the people who believe it, they already believe it.
Totally. It's so funny that even just to pose the question, Gerard, does consciousness exist, presupposes consciousness.
Exactly.
So it's like a scientific koan, if you will. You know,
Right.
it's like the answer's already there. They just proved it.
That's right. Fantastic.
Oh,
Really
God.
good.
Yeah, right. We live in a paradox, don't we?
Yeah.
It's just... Well, let's give your website. This has been such a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Thank you, Mitchell.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be able to carry on like this with you. And
This is the best conversation I've had about this.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah,
And
on radio or anything, or TV or anything.
oh, fabulous. Put that in writing. We'll put it on our website.
Got it.
Let's give your website one more time. Go ahead.
Experimentalist.com.
Available for parties, corporations, and the like. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember that we do have a workshop coming up in mid-October on total biology and reprogramming, which you'll be able to hear about in a new way after today's show. I'm at 212-420-0800. Contact us. Get on our mailing list at www.abetterworld.net. Thanks so much for joining us, and tune in next week when we expect to have Dennis Kucinich joining us. Thanks, and see you then.